Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and whether Gerard Manley Hopkins had style or voice, or both. At a corner table by the fire are three people. One of them is arguing that Hopkins had great diction and syntax, which is different from voice for reasons. And that person's me, Matthew Mellema, and welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to help you connect the great story, the great stories, and our own story in order to understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. Now, if you've ever written stories, you've probably had somebody comment on your voice. You have a strong voice, a unique voice, something like that. We all know that voice is important. In fact, it is essential to a good story. But what is it? Let me take y'all back in time to the mid-aughts. Coldplay and Facebook are both still cool. Jim Halpert and Pam Beesly have finally kissed. And the key to being effective at texting is mastering T9. It was a magical time. I'm in college, majoring in English. And when I'm not trying and failing to get the abs of Gerard Butler in 300, I'm trying my hand at creative writing. And along the way, I receive a compliment that will echo in my head for years, that I have a strong voice. Now, obviously, I was flattered, glad to hear it and all of that, but I wasn't quite sure what that meant. Is it some particular way that I write? If so, what is it? How can I get better at it? How could I make sure I didn't mess it up in the future? Now, throughout the years, I've spent a long time mulling over my voice, but I'm still not sure I can define what that voice is. Honestly, I'm not super sure I can define what any voice is. So that's what we're here to try to determine today. Voice. What is it? Why does it matter? And how do you find yours? And to help me on this quest, I'm joined by Evangeline Denmark and Mandy Hauk. Evangeline, how are you?
I am doing well tonight. Thank you.
Were you good at texting with the T9 board?
I don't really remember.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's par for the territory. How about you, Mandy? How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
Okay. Do you remember when Facebook was cool?
I do, yes. They had the flare. Do you remember that? They had these virtual bulletin boards and you would send each other flare, which I never understood why it was called flare, but it was little buttons of like funny things. Yeah, that was my favorite part of Facebook.
I remember when my college finally got Facebook. And my techie friend runs in and tells me, like, we have Facebook. You need a profile right away. I didn't know what it was, but I signed up and my world was never the same. And my kids will never, ever believe me that Facebook used to be cool.
No, they will not.
But that is neither here nor there. What is here is voice. Either of you have a nice, simple, pat definition for what voice is?
No, absolutely not.
Nope.
What are your priors? Like when you think, oh, this writer has good voice, what do you think, Evangeline?
You had to start with me.
Yeah.
Earlier I told you I had never read a book in my life, remember? Like 5 minutes ago.
It's like, you'll get it.
All right, so since I guess poetry is fresh in my mind because we had a poetry night, Anselm Poetry Night, just the other night. So I can only point to people and examples. Like, so I'm thinking the difference between, is it William Carlos Williams?
Yes.
What is that? The
I've
plums?
eaten the plums that were in the icebox.
Right. Versus.
So much depends upon the red wheelbarrow, glazed in rain, beside the white chickens.
Yes.
That is voice.
Versus.
That is voice.
but so is, turning in the widening gyre, Yeats. So is E.E. Cummings. So it's the distillation of, word choice and lens the author writes through. And
Robert Frost, nothing gold can stay.
Yes.
Nature's first green is gold. Just the cadence and everything is so different than... how does the plum one begin? I have something to tell you. Is that it?
That is just to say.
That is
This
just
is-
to say.
this is just to say.
I have eaten the.
Yes.
Like even just if you listen.
Right. Even those first few words. This is
first few
just to
words.
say the choice that you make to express what you're trying to express is voice, I think.
Okay.
There, we did it.
I have
End
my
of podcast.
End of podcast. So
Play the outro.
I just find this whole thing very confusing. So
do I.
I find it very hard to define voice that isn't just kind of passing the buck, and we have like this infinite regress of voice is tone, and tone is diction, and diction of, like. So yes, Mandy.
I would just say I find it hard to define voice in ways other than what we just did, which is say examples.
Yeah.
There's no way to articulate it. You just go, it's this, and then you give an example.
Exactly.
But yeah, so what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and
Tone.
we will be giving examples here before long. So I agree. I think the best way to get at voice is indirectly, but
It's almost the only way.
yeah. But let's try. Let's look at some attempts to define it more directly. So just before this episode, I decided to just see what the general zeitgeist was. So I did a Google search of what is voice in writing, and here's some of the top results.
Okay.
Okay, so here's this is from a New York Times article, and it says, and I quote, "A writer's voice is the way his or her personality comes through on the page, via everything from word choice and sentence structure to tone and punctuation."
That's close to what I said.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree
Okay.
with that.
So my question, word choice, structure, punctuation, tone, that kind of sounds just like everything about writing. So
It's true.
voice is writing.
Voice is, yeah.
Voice is however you
Creative writing.
express art, because I was just thinking of like Miyazaki's voice in if you think about Studio Ghibli movies, Spirited Away, which I know I always talk about Miyazaki.
Me and Danielle watched Spirit Away for the first time just a couple nights ago.
But
I have
the
thoughts,
lens,
but yes.
yeah, the lens through which you see the story. My Neighbor Totoro has such a strong voice, and it's so gentle. So I think any art that you're creating, you're going to have a voice, even if it's visual.
So like the viewpoint.
Maybe, yeah.
I like lens.
that.
When you say lens, I like that. Because you
Yeah.
think about like the old Alfred Hitchcock movies, and the
Yeah.
women always had the fuzzy, the lens he chose to show certain scenes and certain character or actors and stuff.
Right. It's kind of like, there's a little bit of the aesthetic quality that you choose, which, normally we think of that as a visual, but I think that can apply to, fiction, to music even.
Yeah, because I think it touches the same parts of your brain. Like
Right, sensory.
Right. You react to, this is just to say I ate the plums in the icebox.
Right.
Is touching all these different
It is.
emotional reactions and aesthetic reactions inside you than nature's first green is gold. Its hardest hue to hold.
Yes.
That's so different.
It's so funny. Mandy was moving her hand like she's conducting
Yes.
an orchestra, and that's so true with that. Nature's green is gold. It just flows,
Right.
and it has this cadence. And then this is just to say, you're
You're
already
almost snapping.
You're snapping, right? Exactly. I'm already in the mood. It's going to be funny. It's
Right, like Billy Collins' voices.
oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
So, okay. I think there's a couple things holding me up here. One is saying that a voice is like a lens. It's sort of like using one metaphor to describe another metaphor.
You're
That's
right.
true.
Yeah.
So-
okay.
we're artists.
What
What's
do we
your
mean
problem?
by voice? So obviously this is a metaphor talking about somebody talking at you, giving a speech? How does that help at what we're getting at with writing or storytelling?
Well, someone expressing at you.
Expressing at me. Okay.
Okay, well, if
Right?
you think about literally voice, and I would talk primarily about singing. If you think about compare Billie Holiday's voice to Ella Fitzgerald's voice. So Billie Holiday's is gritty, and it sounds almost like a trombone, not a human's voice. So she has that some people don't like it. It's off-putting to some. But then Ella's is so rich. But then you have like bluegrass singer voices, the females in particular, like Alison Krauss is very thin. And so I think that can be translated to writing. When you think about a singing voice and a writing voice, I think they can be comparable.
Okay, so I don't totally mean to just be playing dumb here, but I know that's the dynamic we're taking here.
It's okay, Matt.
So I see it. I can see the analogy with voice, because like different voices, singing voices sound differently. But is there something beyond that? Like, are we talking about effect on the reader?
Yes, effect on the reader / listener.
Okay.
That's a good question, though, because, I mean, when you're creating something, you have an audience in mind and, you know, a desired effect, but you can't really, I mean, anybody who's had anyone else read anything that they've written knows that sometimes people you just don't connect.
Correct.
You just, and they just miss it. So, yeah, so it's harder than just the reader's interpretation.
And I think it gets even more difficult when we try to really drill down, like, hey, what is it that makes voice? How do you, as a writer, determine your voice? Here's another resource I found. It's from some university. Sorry, university, I forgot which one it was.
Just one of them.
But so let's see. It says, voice is one of the most important features of literature and nonfiction writing and affects how the material is read and received.
Did AI write
Completely setting the mood.
That's AI. That is AI.
Then it goes on later. Consider the elements that make up voice in writing. So now we have 4 bullet
Consider
points.
the elements. There is some voice in this passage, right?
Yeah, I'm
Consider the
thinking
elements.
of Dead Poet Society. Tear that page out.
All right, what are the
Everyone
elements?
consider these
All right,
elements.
we're considering.
I'll consider.
Element 1, diction, or the author's choice of words, chosen to communicate a particular effect. 2, details, includes facts, observations, reasons, and examples. 3, syntax, the way words are arranged. Imagery, or the visual representation of sensory experience. Okay, so we have, again, diction, the details you emphasize, the imagery, and the syntax. So, again, writing. Like, I mean, how can you get more to, like, voice is accomplished by the words you choose and the order you put them in. Yeah, that's all writing is. Choosing words and putting them in a particular order. You can't get more general than that.
That is why I contend, I reiterate, I think that was AI generated. Because what you just read had a very boring voice.
It did.
So
it
I
did
think
make
this is
sense.
timely to talk about voice, because that is the key with all this AI nonsense. AI doesn't have voice.
No, it has imitation.
Well, not yet, but
yeah,
That's
we'll
another
see.
that is a
I know.
future podcast.
Right.
All right, so let's try a different definition. I think we all agree that random university, that was an unsatisfactory one.
AI
My
university.
degree is from Random University.
So now let's go. Here's an article written by someone named Brittany Levy from the Writing Cooperative. And again, I found this just by doing a basic Google search. The title is Writer's Voice, What It Is and How to Find Yours. So let me first of all say to Brittany Levy, I mean no disrespect to you. This is a hard topic, and while I do not find your particular argument convincing, I did find it illuminating. Okay, so she starts off, what's the writer's voice? First, I'll tell you what it isn't. It's not the writer's style. I have a lot to unpack there.
Okay.
It's not their technique. It's not their brand. Okay, so let's start with style. How is voice different from style? Do you agree with that? And second, if you do agree, how is voice different from style?
Well, style could be part of voice.
You have my brain all jumbled up. How would we define style? Like, what do you even, I think style might be even harder to define than voice.
Okay, here I think I can infer here that Brittany Levy would say style has to do only with wording, grammar, and structure.
Okay.
The voice goes beyond it in ways.
Ways. Okay.
Okay.
Because I was about to say, well, style, wouldn't that include, like, how many figures of speech you use
Right.
in your writing.
Your level of vocabulary.
Yeah, are you, is your writing spare, like Hemingway? Is it lush?
Like Faulkner.
Yeah.
Right.
But maybe, according to Brittany Levy, that is something to do with voice and not style.
So maybe she would say style is part of voice, but voice is style plus? In which case, Mandy, what is the plus?
What? I don't know. Ask Brittany. Do you have her number? Let's do a dial-in. I'm not really clear on what she's getting at, because I do think style is an element. I mean, the way that we just agreed to define it, we define terms. If we're talking about, once again, examples are helpful. Hemingway versus Faulkner. Mm-hmm. But I think if you had mentioned Hemingway versus Faulkner and how they're different, I would have said their voices are different. I wouldn't have said style.
Their style. Okay.
I don't really think I don't talk about style.
Yeah.
So that's hard for me to
I would have automatically
grasp.
gone to
Voice. Yes.
Interesting. So
Well,
now
maybe it's because
might
she's
have to-
right and voice isn't
Yeah.
style.
She could be right. Yeah,
I don't
because
know.
we clearly don't know what style is.
I know. Well, I've never been accused of having style.
Yeah, me neither.
All right, so next, she helps us out a little bit by saying which elements are part of your writer's voice. So here we go. First one, personality. So your voice should reflect you, your emotions and beliefs, and what moves you. Okay, how do we feel about that?
My problem with that is are we just talking nonfiction here? Because when I'm writing about different characters, my personality is not coming through.
Well, that's interesting because I think it's easier for voice to come out in, I think that the easiest method for it to come out is like in creative nonfiction, right? So it's just you
Probably.
giving a personal essay.
Well, I don't know.
Well, but you could also see it in lesser, you can definitely see it in fiction too, but it's going to look different.
If you're saying voice is personality, then yes. But I don't think I agree with that, is my point.
So like with your writing, you oftentimes have multiple viewpoint characters, right?
Yes, and that's why I'm saying
your
like,
style or tone or whatever.
what is my voice?
It's going to change based on the characters, right?
Well, but then is that my author's voice? Those are my characters' voices.
I don't know.
I wouldn't say that's your author's
Well, then what
voice.
is? So you do. So then we are saying maybe voice is more of a creative nonfiction
No.
thing. No.
No,
Then what's my voice?
because I wouldn't assign, like, for instance, dialect. If you chose to do a character with dialect, I wouldn't say, oh, that's Mandy's author's voice because she's from this,
Right.
I would.
I am not an
more
old hobo
assign-
that likes Shakespeare.
You're not
That's
what?
I'm not an old hobo that likes Shakespeare. That's my favorite character in my book.
Yes,
but I am
You
not
are
that.
definitively not that.
I am not. I do like Shakespeare. But that's about it.
Yes.
I'm getting old.
But like your voice is bigger than that. So in that way, the sort of like syntax and word choice kind of falls apart because if an author is deliberately, putting a certain spin on a character, then you can't really say that that's their
so
voice.
the voice-
But the broader effort of the whole work, the story.
So you
It's
would
more
say
like
that
a voice.
even if when Mandy's like switching between characters who use different words, arrange their words differently, you would say that Mandy would have some voice that undergirds everything.
Yes.
What is that?
I would say I hear myself obviously when I'm writing third person. When I'm writing like omniscient or third person, even if it's narrow POV, I can come out more. And so, so that's actually kind of why I prefer doing first person because I don't feel like my readers can get to know the characters as well if I'm the one narrating.
I would say, in answer to Matt's question, it's the underlyingness
Yeah.
of it would
So
be
the choices.
maybe your intention.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's get things even more complicated.
Let's do it.
Again,
I'm ready.
Brittany Levy, again, you made a valiant effort. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean it's a bad article. but I can't wrap my head around this at all. She says the next element of voice, so we just talked about personality as an element of voice. Next is tone. How is voice different from tone? They're even both using musical metaphors.
Yeah, I hard disagree on that.
Evangeline, can you find any light between those two? Or are they just synonyms? Is this just a hat on a hat?
That's a good question. I'll have to think about that a little bit more. I mean, because I think the same author could write two different works with different tones, but the same voice.
Oh, you know what? You are right, actually. No, you're 100% correct, because there are certain authors, a lot of authors write pretty similar books, but then there are certain authors, one of my favorites is Colson Whitehead, and everything he writes is different. Like, but you know it's him. It's still him somehow. It's sort of like a band where, like Switchfoot is a really good example of a band where you always know it's them, but you also always know which song you're hearing. Do you know what I mean? Their songs don't sound the same. So like Colson Whitehead is a master at that, because he'll write satirical, funny stuff, but then he'll write like really gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, solemn stuff. But I still know it's him.
Okay.
Do you think that there's the same or a similar intention?
Yes.
Like a way of viewing the world, or like a desire to illuminate or to drive towards.
Yeah, I would say that
goal.
his writing, regardless of what genre he's writing in, it's very hard-hitting and powerful. And no, those aren't really the right words. It's more like edgy and like it makes you uncomfortable until you like sink in to what he's saying. Does that make sense?
Like you surrender, or
Yes,
you're like,
yes.
okay, I'm gonna.
So he kind of makes you uncomfortable. Like, so he has a very authoritative tone, regardless of whether he's writing humor, satire, drama, whatever. And he has, there's a word I can't think of right now, but yeah, I remember I told someone, like, when I'm reading a Colson Whitehead book, I feel like I'm safe in his hands. Like, I trust him.
Yeah, so you're like, I'm willing to be uncomfortable in this.
Yeah, because he knows what he's doing. He knows where he's going. You
Right.
sense the fact that he has a direction,
Yeah.
and he has a sharp, like, I can't think of the words, but this
That's
is why I
interesting.
write. I have time to sit at the keyboard.
know.
Dang it.
I really like I really like that, the way that you phrase that you're safe.
Yes.
In his story.
Because he's so competent, but that's such a lame word. And you also
Skilled,
just feel
yeah.
his absolute passion for writing. Just regardless of what he's writing, you can just feel it.
I think we are actually getting at something here. So sounds like you think that for an author with that voice, even if they're writing from a different character's point of view, a character would use different words, different word order, or if they're doing different tones, like one's satirical, one's playful, one's dark, one's ironic, you'd still be able to identify something connecting it all.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting there.
We're approaching.
Next one. Okay. Another element of writing is rhythm. I don't think this one. I think this is one of those things that's not like the other. Because that seems more associate, like rhythm is an important element of writing.
Yeah.
But that seems in the category of like diction and syntax, right? It's sort of like the building blocks.
Okay, but wait a minute. Isn't that kind of what we were talking about when we were comparing William Carlos Joseph and Robert Frost?
Isn't it William Carlos Williams?
William Carlos Williams.
Like, who's Joseph?
But yeah,
Sorry. Yes, you're correct.
So yeah, so I do think I
of his names are the
apologize.
same.
I apologize to
I don't
Brittany
know how
Levy.
I did that.
I apologize to Brittany Levy for
Well, I apologize
giving
to
a
William
sloppy
Carlos Williams.
critique.
Okay.
But I think what I mean is rhythm is a part of voice, but I don't feel it belongs on this sort of level of generality on her. Like voice is these three things.
It's. I don't really understand her methodology. Like,
Well, and let's all say it.
Sorry,
So this is a
Brittany.
tough concept to get
Let's
at.
hope
too,
she doesn't
so.
listen.
And we didn't read the article, so we're just kind of
Yeah,
going
we're-
off,
You don't
like,
trust me reading a few random passages and wrenching them out of context?
I think
So-
that was rhetorical.
So here's a final point that she wants to make here, in that she thinks that a voice is sort of non-transferable. Like, your voice is your voice.
Agreed.
Okay, you agree.
Agree.
I gave that kind of a side eye, but you tell me why you agree.
Thank you for asking right as I was taking a drink of water.
Mm-hmm.
No, I do agree. That we've talked about this before, how you and I, you talk about how you can't read Cormac McCarthy, because then you like accidentally or on purpose, whatever, try and fail miserably to emulate him.
Yes.
And I did the same with Shirley Jackson, because Shirley Jackson has this incredible way of writing very detached characters, but then you, the reader, are still attached to them. And so I was trying to be cool like her, and I just could not. I don't think, so this is back to AI. I don't think you can imitate. I think it's too unique.
Yeah, I think every artist has their phases of learning by imitating
Correct.
people that they admire. And I
Right.
think that is part of the process of discovering your voice.
Right.
But eventually you come to a place where, all those things are part of your substrate,
Yes.
part of your collective unconscious, or whatever, however you want to say it, that feeds into what is you. So you might
Right.
find like elements of, like turns of phrase that are from other creators that you admire that have kind of come into your repertoire, but they're
Right,
not.
but it's not wholly transferable.
No, it's
Right.
no, it's
Because
not.
wasn't it Ben Franklin that learned to write by imitating a bunch of other writers? I think
That
that's
sounds
right.
like something he would have tried.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I think that's important, but that's how you find your actual voice. The one that's really yours.
Yes. Yeah, but I think it's an important part of the process for
Agreed. Yeah.
Anyone wanting to become good at their art form.
Yeah, the attempt is
Yes,
key.
It is.
Right. But I'm just saying that I don't think it's
Transferable.
to try to do it and trick someone into thinking that it was someone else. Now, I just reminded myself of that movie, whose name I'm not going to remember. Melissa McCarthy was in it, and it was a true story. Talk amongst yourselves while I try to remember.
Melissa
Oh,
McCarthy.
goodness.
I can't even.
Is this the one where she's the identity thief?
Yes, she writes all the. No, not that one.
Oh.
It was a true story about a woman who forged letters, and she was able to imitate the voices so accurately
Yes.
that she was selling them. Oh, can you ever forgive me is the name of the movie.
I don't think I ever saw it.
I
but now,
don't recommend the movie, but it's
Okay.
a really cool story.
Okay. Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember reading something.
No,
about
but
it.
look it up and read the story about the real woman, because so I guess I just debunked myself, but she was able to imitate. She wrote whole letters. So when I heard she forged whatever other authors, I thought they just meant handwriting, but no. She pretended she had found this treasure trove of letters from such and such author, like T.S. Eliot, I think.
Wow.
And she was doing it so well that she was fooling scholars.
But that's not
But
her
that's
voice.
there you go. You're right. It's not her voice. It came back around.
Yep.
Yeah, so related to that. So yeah, I mean that there is that point where anyone who's ever done ghostwriting, so my wife does ghostwriting for different clients, and part of being a ghostwriter is trying to imitate your client's voice, right? So there is that, but I think Danielle or any ghostwriter would say yeah, that's not my voice though.
Yeah.
So that part makes sense, but let's look at this possible scenario here. Let's say I'm guessing all of us have been told at some point or another, oh, I like your voice, right? And you're thinking, what does that mean?
Yeah,
what am I doing right?
Right.
And then conversely, you can imagine someone who's like a young writer, or they're just getting started, and they're like, do I have a voice? What if I just don't have a voice? Like if it's non-transferable, is it just like I have my voice allotment, either I have it or I don't, or is it something else?
I think it definitely can develop. And yeah, I can definitely see starting out and thinking I don't have a voice, especially like I remember the first novel that I wrote was definitely an imitation of an author that I liked. And, obviously that did not go anywhere, but it was part of the process.
Correct.
And
Learning.
it was part of me coming to my own voice. So, I think it's valid and it's okay to be starting out and think, well, I don't know what my voice is. That's why the imitation of the masters is a good way to go. And just getting your hours in,
So you have a voice. It's not practicing creates a voice. It helps reveal the voice.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say.
Yeah.
Okay.
So does living. So does getting old.
Yes.
I recommend it.
Yes. So it's sort of like building a muscle. When your arm is all flabby, you can't actually see what your muscle looks like. But then as you work, put in the hours, everything else kind of falls away, hopefully. Working on my arms.
You get
people.
definition.
Your word muscles start to show.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just get word ripped.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's look at some really, really shredded writers here then. So now I think I would like to transition from talking about in the abstract to looking at examples, because I think both of you touched on this earlier, but this seems to be the sort of topic where you can best understand it by giving lots of examples. So I'll start with an author who I think has a very distinct voice, and he has it for reasons I can't totally put my finger on.
Which is the best kind of voice.
So I'll do Billy Collins. So here's probably his most famous poem, and it's short, so I'll just read the whole thing. Introduction to Poetry. I ask them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. Okay, so first of all, I love that poem.
Yes.
Second, I think you hear a very strong voice there from Billy Collins, but I can't put my finger on why. Any thoughts, Evangeline? Why is Billy Collins good at poetry?
Why is he amazing? I don't know. Again, like my first reaction, or the first thing that comes to mind is his word choice. I'm thinking about the mouse probing its way. Like the use of the word probe is so strong and concrete and visual, and and then there's humor, there's tone in there. There's truth, there's intention, what he's trying to get across,
it feels like he's winking at you.
He is, and he's saying,
yeah,
enjoy, relax and enjoy.
Right. I think his attitude about writing comes through.
Yeah. So attitude is part of voice.
It must be, yeah. But like going back to what you said about the verb probe, that was something I was always trying to teach when I was teaching creative writing. Verb choices, nouns too, but verb choices can be everything. The fewer adverbs and adjectives you can use, the better. Because we have so many good words. So many. It's not 1984 where they're shrinking all the words.
There's not enough words for door. I will say that.
Well, make some new ones. Shakespeare made up all kinds of words.
What was that scene in Donnie Darko where, well, you obviously, you didn't go to my college then, because all of us literary types loved it, but one of the English teachers says like offhand, some famous linguist said that of all the word combinations in the English language, the most beautiful is cellar door.
Okay.
Digression over. As you were saying.
Yes, but cellar entrance, cellar entryway, none of that really works.
Cellar portico.
Portico's not exactly a door, though, is it?
Oh, sorry.
It's like a thing over the door.
That is true. So,
Yeah,
it
please,
didn't work.
please give me suggestions for door.
Here's the thing about Billy Collins in that poem. I feel like I can point to individual elements. There's the diction, like using a word like water ski. I think is really
brilliant.
It's funny. It's
inspired.
It's contemporary. It's casual. And then there's the images, like you mentioned, Evangeline. So there's the mouse like probing its way out, feeling for the light switch. There's the sort of wry sense of humor. Like I do feel like he's kind of like telling a little subtle joke and winking at us. Like, hey, me and you were both in on this little joke together. So there's all those different elements. So there's like tone, diction, imagery, but those are all pieces of it, but that's not the whole thing, right? Like they're all different parts of the elephant, but it's not the whole elephant.
Right, but I mean, a whole bunch of trees together makes a forest. So...
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I like how we're
It
just
can
sort
be
of,
a
we're like lobbing metaphors back and forth at each other.
That's what we do. I will say
I'm
also
perfectly happy.
I know, but another when you were saying that about like the light switch and the water ski, that's another interesting thing, because if archaeologists in the future, if they find that poem, they will know it's not from the 17th century or the 18th. And so maybe that's part of voice too. Is because it's rooted in the time in which the author lived.
In their life.
Right.
Span in their life experiences.
Right.
Ooh, we've moved on to another layer.
Ooh.
So many layers.
Goes deeper.
Strata.
Strata upon strata. All right, Evangeline.
Ooh,
So
word choice.
I did
Nerds.
the repetition, syntax, form, structure.
This is
rhythms.
why I just found out about the band Decemberists 23 years.
Oh,
I
love the
absolutely
Decemberists.
love them.
Yeah.
Well, that's why the word strata came to mind, because there's one line where he's talking about growing up, January hymn. There's a line in that where he says he spent his childhood in snow, stuffed in strata of clothes. And I'm like, amen, sir. Thank you. Yeah. So I just absolutely love the Decemberists, and I'm angry for the 23 years that I didn't know about them.
That's funny.
I'm catching up.
I also recommend June Hymn. It's the time of
June
year
Hymn
for
is
it.
my favorite song.
Perfect time of year for it.
That was my gateway song
Oh, there we go.
to the Decemberists was
All
June
right.
Hymn. Yes. Anyway.
So Evangeline, that their lyricist has a very strong voice too, incidentally, which is one. Yes.
He writes children's fantasy books.
Oh, really? I did not know
Yes,
that.
he
I'll have
does.
to look that up.
Interesting.
All right. Who is your author with a strong voice?
Well, you didn't really tell us. We were supposed to come prepared with
No,
examples.
I like to
Spring
just ambush you.
uncomfortable things upon you.
So I've been sitting here thinking about that during 2020. Brian Brown, the Anselm director, challenged me to rewrite a passage of a Jane Austen novel, or like a Jane Austen scene, as Emily Bronte.
Right.
And then he rewrote an
The
Emily
same
Bronte
scene.
scene
Oh, that's right. In this style
in a
of Jane
Jane Austen voice.
We should read those on a podcast sometime. We should have
There
story time
exists a
podcast.
video of us somewhere. I think it's on YouTube.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay.
Should you really
Put
desire?
it in the show.
But I think that was an exercise in imitating voice. And so what I remember, really struck me, and, Brian would cackle at this, was the proper and refined way that Jane Austen wrote versus the what I would call wild
Yes.
way that Emily Bronte wrote.
Like the more.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, her aesthetic, her imagery matches her voice, her syntax, whatever. Whereas Jane, everything was so witty. I mean, I will give her that witty and
she is so witty.
contained and artistically crafted.
Yes.
In different ways, I have appreciation
But
for
very
both.
light.
Well,
Yeah.
and also Jane Austen. I was actually doing a list of writers whose voice I liked, and Jane Austen is on there, obviously. I think her attribute, Oh, you are wearing a Jane Austen t-shirt.
Yeah, represent.
There you
Okay.
go.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Her style, yeah, it is opposite than what you'd see for Bronte, because hers is based on irony and understatement, right? As opposed to just sort of going all out, letting your hair down and running through the moors. Hers would be more like witty observation, played comedically for understanding with some irony. And that is very different, but she has a very distinct voice too, for reasons I'm still trying to pin down. So were there specific elements you noticed when you were doing the translation?
Well, definitely, Bronte has more run-on sentences, she's more verbose, and the imagery is a little rougher, a little more wild. I would say though that there is intention for both. Even with Austen's witty and often humorous style, there's definitely depth.
Oh yeah.
To her, to her stories, of course, as there is to Bronte's as well. I feel like I'm like giving Brian talking points, and you too, because you're an Austen fan too.
Team Austen.
But
We can all like everything.
we can.
That's what I tell my kids when they're arguing over which superhero's the best.
It's like
They're all super.
pointillism versus just lush, like marks on the campus, or like, I'm not an artist, so I can't think of the word that I'm going for, but just like so
You're not
much.
an artist. You're silly.
I'm not a visual artist, is what I mean.
Okay.
When there's so much on the canvas, there's like a lot of paint, there's a lot of color, there's a lot of, blurred lines. On the campus, campus. There's probably blurred lines on the campus. That's a whole other thing. Anyway, bring it back.
Right.
But
Tangent.
To your point, I will say, when I was thinking about voice, almost before I wrote any author, I was like, oh, Impressionist painters, like Van Gogh, he has voice.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
In a way that's different from style. Like, it's not just his style, right? Although the style is a big
and
part
Van
of
Gogh
it.
in particular, like, freaked people out because he put so much paint on.
Yeah.
So his voice, quote unquote, or whatever, if we're using that for paintings, was very distinct because it departed so much from.
And it's like Van Gogh
day.
and Bronte belong in the same category.
Or the same pub table.
That'd be amazing.
It's interesting
But you know what I
with.
mean?
It's true. Yes. The abandon. There's an abandon.
Oh, I
to
like
it.
that. Yes. Yeah, there's wild abandon, but there's also depth beneath. There's like,
It's
thinking
just
of like
driven.
Kathy's famous scene, to Nellie about Heathcliff being the rock, like she loves Lytton like the foliage, but Heathcliff is the rock beneath. Yeah, there's a foundation there that you're building on, and that you can then be wild and crazy with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, and I do think for me, just trying to like sort this together in my head, having like bringing in some like different painters helped me sort of get a better view of it. But one of the things that I landed on when I'm thinking of artists or just like people who I think have a strong voice, I landed on. First of all, I went to essayists. So a writer who I think has a very strong, distinctive voice I like a lot is David Sedaris.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, personal essays, and again, that is something. There's something in the tone. You can look at the diction, but there's something underlying it. Where
E.B. White's essays are fabulous. Just so you know, he did not just write Charlotte's Web and whatever.
And something about
And
style.
Trumpeter. Oh,
What did he
Strunk
write?
and White's Elements of Style.
Oh, that is E.B. White.
Yeah.
Okay.
Strunk and.
And
White.
White. He's the White of
Yeah,
the
he's
E.B.
the White.
of the Shrunken
Anyway.
White.
But then that got me going over. It's like, okay, I have two concepts. So I'm going to bridge them, and the bridge is Mark Twain.
Oh,
Mark
okay.
Twain.
There you go.
That's voice, man.
That's voice.
Mark Twain has a very distinctive voice
The
for a lot of
frogs.
reasons, and obviously he will.
The frogs.
Calaveras County.
We need to read that.
That should be an Anselm
That should
event.
be an Anselm night.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So,
Okay, that's happening.
obviously, like, Huck Finn, he goes out of his way to, like, mimic very specific dialects. So, in that way, you can see his diction and syntax going all over the place because he's mimicking other dialects. But whether he's doing that, or he's talking about Marvelous Frogs, or he's doing like an essay on the awful German language. There's some underlying voice that I think makes sense for reasons I'm not sure I can articulate, but that makes sense.
He'd be sort of similar to Billy Collins.
He's
as far
winking
as
at
I always
you.
feel like he's winking at you.
Yeah.
And here's something that I found really interesting. I forget where I heard this, but Mark Twain had this shtick for a while because back in his day he was extremely popular. So he'd go and he'd like give talks.
He was like the Beatles.
Yeah, he'd give talks and he'd be on like this platform, huge crowd around him. He's just sort of sitting there. He has like his cigar that he's chomping. He's in his white suit, his flared hair. You know, it's all this shtick. And he'd get up and he'd start talking. You know, he'd tell stories. He'd have this drawl. And what was pointed out, I think it was like a podcast I was listening to, that Mark Twain sort of invented the modern conception of stand-up comedy. Oh, he was kind of the first stand-up comic.
Interesting.
Oh, that is interesting. I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting, though, because his life was actually, he went through so many tragedies.
He didn't end up in a good place either. No. But you can see this sort of performance aspect to him in his voice. Like, again, regardless of what's going on in his personal life, this voice that he created has it.
I think one of the elements of his voice is surprise, because like one of my favorite quotes from him is, "Clothes make the man. Naked people have little to no impact on society." And it's the little to know is the key that makes you know that is Mark Twain.
Yes.
The little to know.
Yeah.
It's the finesse.
But going, sort of following that line, like the children of Mark Twain, stand-up comics, I think if you're looking for someone with voice, I think if you look to a stand-up comedian, that's probably clear examples of it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And part of it is because there's more, it's like multiple medias, right? Media. Because it's not just the written words. It is written words, but it's also the performance aspect.
Stephen Wright just wrote a novel.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'm so excited. I love him. My favorite joke from Stephen Wright is, if you're traveling at the speed of light, and I'm talking like Stephen Wright right now. Evangeline looks like she doesn't know who we're talking about. If you're driving at the speed of light and you turn your headlights on, and then he just pauses and the audience cracks up laughing. His voice is absurdity, I would say.
Well, and there you go. Like that to me is, if I'm trying to conceptualize voice, I'm thinking like, okay, think of a stand-up comedian who I really like. What is it about them? Like their whole thing, Am I making sense? Does this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I have a couple of examples.
Yes, please do share.
These are two, I think, of the most distinct, not the most, I won't say that, but two people authors I thought of when you were talking about voice. So one is Anthony Doerr. This is All the Light We Cannot See. So this is an example of, I'm just going to read, this is the beginning of his leaflets. At dusk, they pour from the sky. They blow across the ramparts, turn cartwheels over rooftops, flutter into the ravines between homes. Entire streets, Mandy does not have her reading glasses on. Entire streets swirl with them, flashing white against the cobbles. Urgent message to the inhabitants of this town, they say. Depart immediately to open country. So, you're automatically what are you figuring out?
I'm repeating the words. I'm feeling them around.
Also, I read it wasn't
like
homes,
swirling
it
them
was
like
houses.
wine.
It was houses, not homes. Mandy needs her reading glasses. But there you have the verbs that he chose. He chose pour, blow, turn cartwheels, flutter. And then we have Colson Whitehead, and this is a little excerpt from Sag Harbor. Randy drove a moss green Toyota hatchback that he claimed to have bought for $100. Its fenders were dented and dimpled. Rust mottled the frame in leprous clumps. And the inside smelled like hippie anarchists on the lam had made it their commune. But who was I to cast aspersions? Randy had a license, he had a car, and our world had changed. So I think both of those clearly have something to do with the context and the time, because All the Light We Cannot See, Anthony Doerr, that's obviously World War two, yes. But their voices are so different, but I like both of them. And so,
And they're both very visual.
yes.
You get strong images from both of those passages.
I did realize as I was reading that Colson Whitehead did use adjectives, but he used really cool ones like leprous.
Yeah. I'm not totally against
I'm not
adjectives.
against adjectives. I just, if you can find a verb that makes you see, find a noun that makes you see it, or if you can, if you can do it without adverbs and adjectives,
Then do it. Yeah.
then do. And please don't use two adjectives in a row.
Yes.
Unless you absolutely have to.
Or unless you're very intentionally doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, nobody would think that was Colson Whitehead if I read that bit from Anthony Dorr, if they were familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of leads where I'd like this podcast journey to end up is trying to come up with our own definitions. So we talked about, we sort of gave sort of our knee-jerk reactions at the beginning. We went through some examples that, maybe had some points, but I think all of us sort of had issues with the examples we used of trying to define it. Then we went through examples of people with good voice. Correct. Now let's try, I'll start. I was thinking about this, and the words that I landed on is when somebody has good voice, to me it means that they have a command of what they're doing, and they also have a comfort about what they're doing.
Oh, I like
So the command is like, you just feel like they're in control, you're in good hands, this person knows what they're doing. And the comfort is you feel like they are being something authentically them, like they're not putting on airs. So picture like the way you would lay on a couch in your own home as opposed to somebody else's home. Oh, it's that sort of thing. It's like you feel like you can just be fully yourself there without any airs, but you also feel in control of the matter. That to me that is my best approach at voice.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right. How about you? How about you, Evangeline?
I'm going to stick kind of closely with intention and lens. The author's intention with the story, but not just with the story, kind of their driving theme that they kind of keep coming to in their writing. And I'm not being succinct at all, am I? But you're talking about Colson Whitehead's passion. So maybe like the author's passion versus the lens that they allow you to see it through.
Yeah.
In their work.
It's funny, I just realized I'm a very visual person, and so I just realized that when I read Colson Whitehead, it feels like he's standing up.
That's interesting.
The whole time. Not like rigidly or anything, but he's
in command of the
room. There's like
a
stance. Yes, yeah. I think and I didn't have this before we started this podcast, so hey, this podcast was useful. It seems to me that what's really important is where the voice springs from. Rather than thinking about the result, think about from whence it springs.
I love it.
That was not authentic to Mandy's voice. Okay, Matt is laughing so hard. Okay. I think what voice reveals about an author is how they see the world.
Yeah.
It's their perspective, which goes back to lens, because they're going to put a lens on their writing that to us it's a lens. To them, that's just their eyes. But we're putting on the lens of their perception. And that's why it feels different to us, is because it's unique to them.
And if they do it well, then
Yes, Lewis.
Lewis is expressing. He's using his voice.
Every
We
good
hear your
every
voice.
good pub needs a pub cat.
Yes.
Yes.
But if they do it well, then your viewpoint is opened and you're able to see through someone else's eyes, and that's a creator using voice well.
And you know what? That probably is what the discomfort is when I read Colson Whitehead. That's probably what I'm sensing, because he writes about things I don't know. Because he is a black man who writes, and it's not all like, I don't know, he can't help but write as a black man. So his topics aren't necessarily like, his novels aren't all like, hey, racism or anything like that. But it's inherent, and that is his perspective. And so he helps me see, as we're actually the same age, Colson Whitehead and me. And he's won 2 Pulitzers. What have I been doing? Anyway, so when I found out we were the same age, that was really interesting to me, because his perception is so completely different than mine. And it's because he's a city boy, he's a black man, he's a master's in fine arts and creative writing, and I'm a suburban white chick, and so duh. And I mean, maybe that's what reading should be, is to help us see things from other people's perspectives or hear it in their voice.
Yes.
Well, guys, I think we solved the problem. Right? I think we pretty much nailed it.
Let's cheers.
Yeah, I'm satisfied.
Voice is officially defined as far as I'm concerned now.
You're welcome, audience.
And as y'all can probably tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have maybe 30 or so seconds to spare right now, please rate and review this show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.